Hello, everyone. So diving into UI stuff, panel stuff, buttons, sliders, containers, making UI user interfaces to control our parameters. So I'm thinking maybe we'll do these 5 different parts here. Um, so hopefully there's construction going on right below me. So if you hear terrible grating noises, then it's not me. It's down below. Let's dive in and let's just look at a few types of buttons to start. So we're gonna do, let's do maybe like a few buttons, let's say. And then also I'll get some sliders happening. So let's just, from the start, let's see what is happening here. So there's a few types of buttons. By default, we have toggle down on. So when you see this down and up, that really just means the state changes according to mouse down or when the mouse comes back up. So you can play around with whatever feels best for you. Toggle down to activate it if you're active, right? So now it's on, now it's off. It toggles on or off. For the next most useful type, momentary. It doesn't have an on or off state. It kind of just, it is momentary. So only when the mouse is down, it's active. And then when I release, it goes off. And then the last really useful type, we'll look at a few other demos on this. That would be a radio button. So all three of these have radio down button type, and that means it's kind of a exclusive thing. So if I click one, that deactivates the other one. But we'll look at that more in another place. And then the slider, activate it, right? It's really, just by default, we've got this just a horizontal slider in the normal op dialog here. In the palette, we've got some other things here. If we go UI, basic widgets. So this is actually, we can feel free to take a look at all these other things. There's lots of other really cool UI stuff. So we actually have some other, slider vert. That's another version here, which has some extra little UI stuff happening with it, but it's creates a vertical thing. It's got a display, so you can dive into that and kind of look, tweak that to your heart's content, or kind of go in here and kind of tweak those settings also. But that's something you can look into on your own. But let's go back up maybe to our buttons here. So with a toggle and a momentary button, we've seen in a previous demo in the sound tutorials, maybe using a toggle for play on or off, and then a momentary for a cue, going to an audio file in chop. Could also be useful for like a movie file in top. And so again, just to change the text there, we can look, this is a text top. So whatever, I'm just gonna say play on off here. And if that's too much, we can word wrap, right? We can change the font, the size. By default, every button has this nice sort of dat table holding values for its elements here in the color tab. And this is also a good exercise to kind of really look at this and try to understand exactly what's happening. Because this is looking up a certain row and column inside this operator called color, which is this table, right? But then to determine which row and which column it looks at, it's looking at this op called I, which is down here, which is an expression chop, which we haven't really looked at that at all. And then grabbing that value right there, plussing one, and then looking at the column called font here. So instead of the column number here, we're looking at the column name, which we have in our dat table here. So you can look at that a little bit more on your own. I think it's worthwhile. So this panel right here, this is really what we want to focus on right now, though. So there's one right there, but what I want to do is just kind of keep it a little bit simple. I'm going to make another chop panel, And I'm going to drag that right there. And so we can see, actually, can we see? Maybe not. Oh, barely we can see it. I'm going to activate this one, and to see this a little bit better, I'm going to right click, view, and I should be able to, there we go. Okay, let's make sure I'm not like covering it with my webcam. Okay, great. So we see all this great information that the panel is giving us. So in general, a panel is, if we look in the dialog here, so this says panels. So all these things are types of panel components. So that is technically short for control panels. So you can think of panels as anything that's involving UI stuff at all. And so all of these panel comps give all of this information. So you can see even if I'm not even clicking it, I'm getting kind of rollover values. So U being the horizontal and V being the vertical. And if I click it, there we go. So this U and V value gave me the point where I clicked. So just by seeing this, I realized like, oh, maybe I don't even want to use this as a button. You could also use it as a kind of two-dimensional, whatchamacallit, right? Two-dimensional kind of scalar controller thing with rollover as well as kind of a click component there. So whatever those numbers go to, I don't know. So you might notice up here when the mouse is actually down, that select channel goes to 1. I'm clicking with the left mouse button, so L select goes. I can also select middle mouse button and right mouse button. So you can program other sort of functionality depending on that. There we go. So I'm holding shift and left clicking. So if I'm holding just shift by itself, there we go. Okay. Mouse is over that, so now it actually shows that I'm holding shift. There we go. So command, whatever. So you can figure out more complex things if you really want to. So these other ones we don't really need to know right now. But what I care about for the toggle is this state. So state is showing us the toggle value on or off. Beautiful. At least for me, 99% of the time, if I'm using a toggle button, like all I really care about is the state. So in the panel here, we can select individual channels that we want. So I'm just going to select state, and then there it is. Great. And so one way I might use this, right? I'd probably go ahead and do like a null, and just like any other chop reference, right? We can drag that somewhere else. So we can control that with the button. Okay, great. So for a momentary thing, like something like a Q pulse or anything that needs like a kind of single momentary trigger or pulse, this is useful. So let's get another panel right here. Tell the panel which thing to look at. And this shows exactly the same information, even though the button type is different. You'll notice down here, though, the state, it goes up as the mouse is clicked down, but it doesn't actually toggle. Okay, beautiful. So for a momentary button, 99% of the time, I'll just use that for the select. Right? This shows us when the mouse is down. Great. And so once again, right, maybe do like a null, send that somewhere else. For a slider, let's see, did I delete the slider? I think I did. Let's do this one here. And, similar thing. We've got a panel in there. This is only looking at the U. It's got this other little container thing, which is actually doing a little look ninjery to show up as a kind of handle on the slider. So because I've got this, so this panel is right here, and then we're going out. So I could just do a good old-fashioned null right there, and very easily I can see it goes from 0 to 1. I think down here in the panel, it actually renamed it kind of by default in a lot of these. It renames the parameter to v1 for the panel. Like, you don't have to do that. So maybe if U makes sense to you, you can keep it like that, or rename it to whatever you want. So by default, these buttons have this nice little text top in there. And so they are showing up because if we look, like with a container or a lot of other things, if you look at the Look tab, background top, we see /bg. So / means look inside myself for an operator called bg, which is this text top. So that's why it is showing up there. Slider doesn't have that by default. So let's do that. Let's do text. And let's pretend I'm going to use this for an opacity parameter somewhere. And I can go in, same thing, look, background top, /, and I just kept it as text1. Okay, so that looks terrible. Why does it look terrible? So what is the resolution of our slider? We need to look at layout to find that out. So it is 100 by 20. Our text top is the default 256 by 256. So obviously that's the reason why the text looks unreadable. So, you know, I could do that. Yeah, okay, now I need to kind of change that a bit, don't I? There we go. Okay, that looks better. You know, if you care about the kind of fuzziness of this, so I guess for one, I'm using I'm not using the experimental builds that was coming out kind of earlier in 2022. Which is going to have a much better kind of text engine for all the comps. So I'm still on an older version, so kind of by default the text looks pretty fuzzy. Also because this, right, it's just basically a 100 by 20. It's a fairly small size. You know, if you care about something like that, we could do something like, you know, just make these much bigger. And what do I do? Right, so then I can kind of go back here, make this bigger again. Right, okay, so that looks much better. So whatever you want. So by default, the buttons and sliders and things tend to be a fairly small size. I think by default this button is, go to layout, 50 by 50. Okay, cool. You know, one other little trick. I just, you know, knowing that the slider is 400 by 100, I just typed that in manually. Another trick to use a little bit of Python would be me.parent.width and me.parent.height. So instead of doing that manually, now if I were to change this, whatever, right? So this automatically changed with that. So that's kind of a nice trick. When we're talking about the me.parent.digits in these series of demos also. So me means this text top. The parent of the text top would be slider 1, because that's if you go out, right? So the text top is inside slider 1, so slider 1 is the parent of that. And then the width of this would be, right? So this is the parameter W. I'm actually looking at an attribute called width, which is equal to the W parameter, but whatever, you don't need to worry about that right now. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's imagine doing like a lot of these. You know what? So I'm going to copy and paste this a lot. I'm just going to go back to like a standard thing here, just so we're not like worrying about it too much. I'm going to make this 50, and let's do something easy actually. Okay, that looks good. So, building an actual interface. Yeah, I'll keep that null there, that's fine. Let's start with just the slider, and let's see what we can do. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, cool. Let's make 8 of these. So let's imagine I had, 8 different parameters that I want to control with these sliders. I'm going to form a little UI with this. So each of these is 200 by 25. So how many did I make? I made 8. So they should be 25 times 8, 200. So 200 by 200. Okay. You know what? I'm going to cut that, paste that in there. Okay, cool. So now all of these sliders are children of my container one, and maybe I'll just go ahead and rename this to sliders. And they are all kind of stacked at the bottom here. I can go into the children tab and go to align and figure out how I want them to be aligned. So that looks great. So now I can click that, right? Kind of play with all of these separately. Beautiful. You know, I could actually do something. You know what? Let's make this kind of cool. Let's do a text top. And I'll do this again. Capital Me, no. Okay, cool. And now, instead of having like a label, I mean, we could do labels for all these, like opacity, brightness, whatever the parameter is going to be. I could do something like drag that. Okay, so that's going to give me the value. Let's make that smaller again. And, you know, I'm not really doing something that detailed and resolute. I don't need a gazillion decimal places. So here's another little Python. Here I can just use round. And let's see. Okay, so we get error off the bat here with our little Python. So I was just forgetting. We need this extra little .eval method to prepare our chop information properly for this little bit of Python. So for whatever reason that is necessary in this case, in other places you can just use the round function as is. So this is the value that you want to round, and then the number of decimal places to do that. So that looks pretty good. And what we might do, actually, let's do horizontal. Can we do? Cool. Okay. Let's do that. Okay, great. So now this is going to kind of show us what our value is. All right, let's do this over. Bum, 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 bum. And now I have all of these. Okay, great. And so what I might do is, you know, to actually use these, you know, I could just select these telepathically from anywhere in my entire network if I want to, or I could just do a little merge. Actually, no, not null, and then do like an out. There we go. So then I would have access to all of these right there. Okay. So another little element. You know, this looks a little bit stuffy. Like maybe I want a little spacing in between all these things. So in the children tab here, there's a lot of other kind of cool, more like a visual organization that you can do. So on spacing, if I type in 5 there, okay, that's cool. So it made a little extra space. So now obviously I need to reconsider what my layout is. Oops, not width. So something like that. And maybe actually 245. So children, vertical, center. Cool, okay. And let's go ahead and do 210. Cool, so now I have spacing of 5 on each of these. and it's centered. So, okay, that looks pretty good. Great. Um, Basically, same thing we could do with the buttons, right? The general workflow is create a container, be aware of its width and its height, put all of your elements inside, being aware of their width and height. With the children tab, um, align them in some way, add spacing, add so margin also could do this adding on the top and the sides. Up here, I achieve that by just making the width and height a little bit bigger and then justifying in the center. So that is essentially doing the margin also. Maybe one other little trick. Once we start kind of putting all these things together, maybe we have labels inside each slider, so that's helpful. What if I wanted to kind of master label on top of this? So let me show you what I mean here. So for each of these, because I had made it like 25, right? Let's do that. And you know what? Let's do justify vertical. Let's do bottom. But I want... Okay. So that since I had to do the margin to make sure that popped up. So I got a little extra space in here. And what I'm going to do now is create another text top. And then let's see, how wide was my container? It is 210. And that should be about 25 tall, this little space. So I'll do 210. Whatever. If there's a meaningful label that you can give to that, we can do text 1. Actually, you know what? That needs to be the full size. Right. Yeah, let's do it like this. me.parent.width. Right. That's how I wanted to do it. So let's do position. Up at the top there. Okay. All right. So now that's going to fill the whole background. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. So kind of a nice little UI thing there. So what if let's just do this really quick too, just piece these together. I'll do a couple buttons. Actually, let me make sure, because this is going to be height is 270. Okay, so let's do this too. Let's do height 270, and we'll do like, let's try like 100. Maybe like, let's see how that looks. Okay, and let's imagine whatever. They could be whatever type you want. Add a little margin. Okay, fine. Then maybe I'll just do center for these. Okay. So let's say I got both of these. Okay. So we just continue to kind of put these together. So I'm going to do whatever, master UI. Do this again. So now those are both children, so I can align, let's say, left to right. Okay, so I could like resize this some more. Maybe that's a little bit big. So that's starting to look pretty good. So I could do like another label for the whole thing, whatever. So one other little trick here, which is align order. So let's say, as I had it right here, my sliders are actually on the left. It doesn't really matter what the position of these are anywhere for how it shows up inside the parent container. But let's say I wanted to make sure the sliders are on the left and the buttons are on the right for whatever reason. I could do that by changing the align order. So down here on sliders, align order is 0. And on the buttons, let's do align order 1. Poof, there we go. So it's going to, if I'm doing align left to right, so starting on the left is going to be the lower number, and it progresses towards higher numbers. So you could do this for as much as you want. So maybe like, these 3 buttons mean something. You've got another 5 buttons triggering movies. You've got another set of sliders. All of them are embedded inside containers. So you could have like containers within containers within containers within containers to make it as complex as you want it. And then, each successive nesting is sort of aligning the children in the way that you want. Okay, cool. And we might do something like, like in the way I did it for the sliders. I had that's all coming out, right? So maybe we could have like everything with like outs, and they're all kind of coming out to the parent level here. That's one way to do it. We could also, do something like a select. And instead of using outs at all, I could, let's see, what is this called? Null. I could go in here to like null 3 is the name of that. Okay. So I could say, look into master UI, the thing called sliders, the thing called null 3, right? And then we have that right there. So maybe this is just the UI. I can right click, view. This kind of floats right there, and then over here somewhere else is where I actually need to use it. So I can do the chop reference maybe closer to whatever the operator is that I need it to go to. Okay, cool. Okay, a little addendum to the last one. I realized the align order parameter is like basically hidden behind my webcam here. So I just want to show, right, sliders has align order 0, buttons has align order 1. Okay, great. And then also one other little thing. So let's say I add like one more little button. So by default, this shows up, right? So this becomes a child of the master UI container thing. Let's say I don't want it to be aligned in the same way. I just want to be able to manually kind of place it, let's say like, I don't know, in a very specific spot in my UI. So we can do that. We can go... Okay, so first of all, under layout, by default, parent alignment is set to allow. If I say ignore, so there we go. So now the parent's trying to align its children left to right. This one is not allowing the parent alignment, so it's just kind of like plopped in the corner. So what we can do now is manually tell it where to go. I'm going to split this so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And so now I have this button selected. On the layout, on this X and Y, we can move this around as we wish. So if you want a very specific spot for that, let's say right there for some reason, this would be a kind of a pain to kind of nest things and just do the align thing to get it exactly right there. But we can turn off parent alignment and then manually set the X and Y for that element. Cool.